Hi, everyone. Welcome to Leisrealtalk. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon. This is Lay's Saturday Night Live. Well, thank you for spending the time with me. All right, so today we're going to talk about one tough subject because this subject is sensitive and it can be dividing. But Beijing has released very little information about the status of its outbreak. Today, it reported nearly 60,000 deaths in people who had COVID since the early December. But people are not convinced the data is reflective of the actual outbreak. The biggest concern is if there's any new variant occurred in China, because that might impact the rest of the world. Well, I haven't found anything worth sharing with you on that subject. But what I notice is Chinese are talking about the Chinese made vaccines. I found one recent survey conducted in China and one article from 2021 that might have accidentally reviewed the role Chinese vaccines have played in the current outbreak, and particularly how the vaccines are made. I mean, how they were made may be problematic. I know vaccine is a topic that can divide people. I'm not here debating the role vaccine plays in the pandemic. I'm exploring the possibility of faulty Chinese vaccines that might have contributed to the unprecedented outbreak. I'm raising a question that I think medical professionals or medical scientists who have more resources than I do to look into it. Because China has sold its vaccines to what it claimed 28 countries. I have not been able to verify that, but it said that it has sold to 28 countries. So the impact is not just within China's borders, it's around the world. So first, let me share with you an article, a survey, I should say. Here is the survey. Okay, here's the survey. This survey was published on December 19th last year by a paper called The Economic Observer. And it was done, it was a survey done from December 16th to 18th online, and it collected 7,000 answers. So it had nearly 7,000 participants. The participants were spread from 32 provinces and direct municipal cities. And 51% of them were infected or was infected. 11% had recovered and their antigen test turned negative. 8% still had COVID symptoms, even though their antigen test was negative. And 8% was not tested, but had obvious symptoms. So the total participants in terms of those infected versus not infected is 78% versus 22%. So 78% infected and 22% not infected. More than 70% of the people infected had fever. I have a slide. So this is the actual chart. And so this is a breakdown by age. And I'm sorry, the last age group on the right should be 60 plus, not just 60. It's 60 plus. So it's interesting how elderly people were more likely to have low temperature, right? So a third, if you look at the 60 plus group on the far right, so they have a third had low fever, and a third had fever between this is Celsius, so I don't know what's the Fahrenheit. 38 to 39, so under 40, so under 102 degree, I think. But then high fever is over 40 degrees Celsius. That's what, 102. So you see how the old elderly people mostly have low fever or just fever, right? And then there's also a big percentage. The reason it doesn't add up to 100 is because there are people who don't have fevers. But if you look at the children under 10 on the far left, like if you add up, it's like 95% had fever, and 10% of children under 10 had high fever over 102 degrees. So I think it's 104. 40 degrees Celsius is 104, I think. So that's one finding. And then the next one, um, yeah, so people believe that children half of the people believe that even though children have high fevers, but half of the people surveyed believe that children recover faster. Um, and then 14% believe that children were the same as adults. Only 5% people said that children had more serious symptoms. Okay. And then in terms of recovery, um, about 84% of the people recovered after 7 days. And the younger the age, there's another chart, which I don't have it here. Basically, the younger the age, the faster the recovery. Um, that's that's just a general kind of the general um, index, the general summary of the analysis. But what's interesting is comparing between the two cities. Okay, let me remove myself so you see the full chart. So people, as the earliest cities that were hit, Beijing and Guangzhou led the other cities in seeing um, the infection spikes. And there were beliefs that the north and the south, Beijing is in the north, Guangdong is in the south, right? So there was a belief that the north and the south had different variants because the symptoms were different. Well, based on this survey, there were no major differences between the symptoms. There were some, in some areas, like for example, loss of smell was not so obvious in Guangdong, right? It's only about 12% versus 22% in Beijing. But it's in general, generally speaking, Guangdong percentage of people seeing these symptoms is less than Beijing, but they're in the same ballpark. What I want to point out is this analysis, the data, like I have noticed other people based outside China have seen this survey, and they say the conclusions of this this survey has been adjusted or tuned to be in line with the government's narratives, but the data they believe is accurate. So that's what I'm showing you the data here. Okay, so next page I think is interesting. So even though the symptoms are similar, but people in the South seem to recover much faster. So if you look at the number of days to recover, the blue line is Guangdong, the green line is Beijing, and you see I circle, like 1 to 3 days. Look, it's the 42% of the people in Guangdong recovered within 3 days versus only 18.7% in Beijing. And then over 8 days on the far right, Beijing had 18%, right? 0.018 is 18%. So 18% in Beijing recovered over 8 days, whereas that number is only 4% in Guangdong. So even though the symptoms are similar, but people in the South do recover faster. So I thought that's interesting. Okay, so what's most interesting is this chart. This shows the percentage of people who have symptoms relative to their vaccination status. So you have 4 groups. You have on the far right are people who are not vaccinated, and then you have people with 1 dose of vaccine, 2 doses, and then and then the people with not only the 2 doses but also booster shots. So, and then in terms of the colored bars, they represent how severe their symptoms are. So the blue is no symptom. It's very little, right? It's on the far left. You could barely see it. The aqua color, or I call green, is the people with mild symptoms, and then the yellow is not so mild symptoms, and then the orange is the severe symptoms, and then the green is pneumonia. Interestingly, you can see that the vaccines did not make a difference in alleviating people's symptoms. If anything, it aggravated people's symptoms. Because this chart is kind of hard to read because the numbers are really small. So there's another chart. Let me hide myself. So this, I think my logo covered up the title. That one, the one right behind my title, says critical condition. Okay, on the far right, top right corner is critical condition. So if you look at the two numbers, no symptoms, if you look at the no symptom column on the left, non-vaccinated seems to have the highest percentage, right? 1.77% versus the 1.11%, the people with booster shots. And then you look at the far right corner, the ones that are in critical conditions or severe conditions on the far right. The ones with booster shots had some cases based on this survey, and then there were none in the other three, in the other three categories. And then I circled the percentage that has the lowest in between the four symptoms, from very mild to not so mild to people who have pneumonia. And in three of the four categories, the non-vaccinated group seemed to have the least symptoms. It's the lowest. The only group that has the people who have the booster shots at 2.51% is that group. That's the only group where vaccinated people seem to do well or has done the best. So this brings us the question. So what happened to Chinese vaccines? They don't seem to have protect people, right? It's what has happened there. This Yeah, I provided the link for you at the end of the at the bottom of the description, so you can take a look. I tell you the numbers are right, but don't look at the conclusions, right? So why are Chinese vaccines not effective? Well, many people attribute it to let me come back. Many people attribute it to the type of vaccine China makes, right? They make the inactivated virus vaccine, which is generally believed to be underperforming when compared with the mRNA vaccines made in the West. That might be part of the reason. There's another reason that explains why China has a major outbreak with high fatality. And let's talk about China's two largest vaccine makers. They are Sinopharm and Sinovac. They both make inactivated virus vaccines. Unlike the mRNA vaccines, which are quick to produce because they don't involve the use of live viruses, inactivated virus vaccines are generated by growing and isolating the virus and killing it, either with a physical or a chemical process. The process preserves molecules that can prime the body's immune system to fight an infection if the person is exposed to the virus. But if the process doesn't, quote unquote, kill the virus, then the vaccine becomes the source of infection. If the process destroys the molecular components of the virus, then the vaccine becomes ineffective. Nikkei Asia, here's Nikkei Asia. had an article on March 2021 and quoted an associate professor at the School of Public Health of the University of Hong Kong as saying that although the inactive virus vaccine technology is well established, the pace of production is hampered by the need to use the live virus and process it. And that manufacturing must be handled in laboratories with strict biosafety controls. And in China, this is still according to the Nikkei article, and in China, only laboratories with the highest two standards of biosafety clearance can be used, and they are level 3 and level 4. And the Nikkei Asia article, quoting a Chinese finance media, Caixin, reported, here's the chart. Let me make it bigger. Sinopharm and Sinovac both had aggressive plans to expand production to meet both domestic and export demands. And here's actually the picture from the article, or from Caixin. Sinopharm's Beijing Institute of Biological Products was building a new facility to expand annual production capacity to 1 billion doses. And Sinovac's first production line for its COVID-19 vaccine was designed with a capacity of 500 million doses a year. And a second line was launched in 2021 to double the capacity to 1 billion doses. By the way, between these two companies, Sinopharm and Sinovac, they contribute to like 90% of the vaccines that China uses. The survey also reflects that. The survey reflects that 90% of the people have been vaccinated. I think Chinese media reported as of March last year, 89% of Chinese had been vaccinated, had been given full vaccination, meaning receiving at least 2 doses. So Beijing's aggressive, let me come back. Beijing's aggressive plans got me interested. I asked the question, how was China able to build such large-scale production facility with the highest biosafety clearance requirement within such a short amount of time? And I started to look. And I found, here we go. I found this article. China's Science and Technology Daily had a long article dated July 20th, 2021, that detailed how one of these facilities were built. The article detailed many challenges that building these facilities met, but attributed the success to the party's leadership and to the party members' loyalty to meet the government requirements. And it's eye-opening to me. But it nonetheless showed us how Chinese overcame the challenges. I also provide the link to you. You can take a look. It's in Chinese. I think you guys should save it before Chinese CCP decided to remove it, because I think it really showed a lot of its dirty laundry. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what it says. Let me come back. In a place called, I'm basically giving you kind of a synopsis of what this article says. It's very long. I'm not going to read everything, but in a place called Daxing outside Beijing, there's a high security area. It's the world's largest production plant of inactive virus vaccine for COVID. Liu Jingzhen, the chairman of Sinopharm, called it the largest arsenal for COVID vaccine. China's State Council required Chinese farmers to produce 5 billion doses of COVID vaccine a year. And this particular facility mentioned in the article could produce 3 billion doses. And we have a contractor, or general contractor, a guy who was kind of put in charge of building this facility, Mr. Ge. And he was responsible for building this facility. He had been, according to the article, in the construction business for over a decade. The article quoted Ms. Ge as saying this. He said, "I have never done a project like this." I thought, what did he mean? It could mean that Mr. Ge had never built a bio lab with level 3 and level 4 clearance. Or it could mean that it was mission impossible for him to build it, right? He said, "I've never done a project like this," meaning all the conditions attached to building this project was impossible to him. Or it could mean the both, right? It could mean both of them. The article described why it's mission impossible. It said, and this is in Mr. Ge's words, only 4 months to not only, I was given only 4 months, not only to construct a building, but also to install the complex equipment, finish plumbing, electricity, and gas lines, and to configure a filtration system. Mr. Ge said he was given the time that's only 1/10 of a normal project. So he was given 1/10, 10% of the time that a normal project would require. I don't know his normal project mean this type of project or the normal project that he typically does. But the article said, as a Communist Party member himself, Mr. Ge took his client's words as his motivation. The article said that Mr. Ge remembered the words from another Communist Party member, that's the Chairman Liu of Sinopharm, who said, "We need to liberate all mankind from the gloom of the virus." I have to laugh. And these words give contractor Ge great motivation. And he worked day and night without sleep with a group of fresh college graduates. How many people did he have? 1,500 people. How big was the project? The facility was not very big. It said it's only 60 meters by 60 meters. So in square footage, 60 meters is what? 700 feet by 700 feet. So it's about 3,600 square meter facility. The size is not that large. And the article even said you have this many people. Basically, you have one person per 2 square meter. But they used, a typical CCP approach to these. Have you heard of the Chinese expression, 人山人海, people mountain, people sea? It just means the CCP likes to use like massive number of people to tackle a mission. Like in wartime, they just use people, right? And so they used a similar approach. And the article even said, so you have every person every 2 square meters. And then I'll give you one quote. And so this, let me make this bigger. So this is actually from the article. It says, in order to make the vaccine blueprint become reality with the fastest speed and meeting the strictest standard, innovation was carried out throughout the construction process. The builders competed with every second of the time in a spirit of creating the conditions without conditions to achieve the highest standard and meet the strict requirements and early deadlines. When I read that, I'm like, wow, this sounds like another great leap forward movement, right? This is like reenactment of another great leap forward political movement. So what do you mean by creating the conditions without conditions? Basically just tell you to come up with something without any means, right? And then how can you build something with the fastest speed while meeting the highest standard? That's not possible. If you want the best, highest standard, if you want the best quality, you need time, and you need to be given like tools and materials. And I mean, it's just, but this is a very typical CCP mentality. If you people We typically hear this kind of expressions in China. If you study Chinese language, or if you lived in China, or if you're born in China, you know this. You know how Chinese always say 多快好省, right? 建设社会主义, like they want to build the Chinese economy fast, cheap, uh, and on a large scale, and then as frugally as possible. Like they want everything. And so this is a typical CCP mentality, but how can you do it? But anyways, so oh, I haven't come to this guy yet. So let me come back. Um so what happens? Well, cutting corners. Let me give you an example. So I'm going to read you what the article says. Inside the vaccine plan, all system had to form a complete loosed, it has to be a complete closure, which posed a big challenge in construction. The high temperature gas for the production process needs to be supplied by an independent and closed system, Mr. Ge said. He said such piping must withstand high temperatures and pressures, posing a great challenge for domestically produced pipes, meaning that if you use domestic pipes that are made in China, it cannot stand the high temperature used for the equipment. In order to construct a biosafety grade workshop environment, and of the components and any of the components, I'm just reading you the translation from this article. In order to construct a biosafety grade workshop environment, any of the components must be airtight, among them ensuring airtightness of the pipes through the wall is the most difficult. And Mr. Ge said, in a normal project, you would make a wrap around the wall and then glue it to make a tight fit between the pipes and the wall. He said, but in this project, there's so many pipes, and they are high temperature pipes. And the most challenging part is that the domestic parts cannot withstand the high temperature of more than 130 Celsius degree. And he said some of the materials and engineering parts are not available in China. So Mr. Ge and his team improvised. They increased domestically made parts temperature tolerance by putting a layer of heat insulation on the pipes so that the key engineering parts would not be directly exposed to high temperature, and thus increase the pipe's temperature tolerance. And this article described. I don't know how you feel, but I'm a little scared because if you were building my house, I would be concerned. If you have these pipes with such high temperature, if you just wrap them around with insulations, what if it catches fire? Is that safe? It sounds like they just come up with an improvised solution without giving a lot of thoughts and without due diligence to test it out. Because you're not building like a home furnace. You're building a bio lab that has such a high, safety requirement. So I'm a little scared. But people from mainland China probably don't see any problem in this, and they think it's a great success story. Because this is just one example. If you read the article, it gives other examples. But what I saw is a substandard project that has cut many corners in order to meet the deadlines, in order to meet the mission impossible. I think Mr. Ge's mission impossible was not created by the difficulty of the project, but rather by the rushed deadline. He could have, if he was given time, he could have ordered the foreign parts that meet the safety requirements, right? That can withstand the temperature. So he wasn't given the time. And he could not have asked for more time. He could not have turned it down because it's a political assignment. You can only comply. You can never challenge the government's requirement that you must meet the deadline. Um, and Mr. Liu, the chairman of Sinopharm, thinks the same way. Um, Nobody can say no to the party. So that just shows you the safety hazard of these high-tech products that are made in China. When the entire system or when entire society like function in that kind of CCP mentality, and now you understand why we're concerned with Chinese rockets, the debris of Chinese rockets return to Earth without plan and it could hit anywhere, right? Um, so I think it must be heart-wrenching for those of you who are in the field of biosafety. Um, and think about it. If anything happens, right, what would happen to the production process that is supposedly designed to remove the toxicity of the virus used in the vaccine, right? So anything that goes wrong in that process, then the vaccine either becomes ineffective or it becomes the infectant injected into people's body. Is that why we're seeing symptoms not from Omicron? Is that why we're not seeing typical Omicron symptoms, but the symptoms from the early pandemic outbreak, like the loss of smell and the loss of taste? That we saw 25% of the people in Beijing experience these symptoms. It's probably because Chinese were given the vaccine that used the early virus variant that had those symptoms. I'm not a medical professional, so I can't answer those medical questions, but I highly question the safety measure at this type of facility. And I don't think this facility is the only one. And another reason that makes me worry even more is the corruption associated with safety inspection and also medical, how to say, approval process of these vaccines. So there have been rumors after rumors about how the Sinovac have bribed government officials to provide convenience when it comes to the approval of vaccines, and people documented 18 cases of corruption. And recently, I do have a picture of him. This guy, Yu Luming, he was the former Beijing Municipal Health Commission, the head of Municipal Health Commission in Beijing. And he was in charge with the responsibility of approving vaccine for the Beijing Sinovac. And on April 16th, 2022, he was being investigated. And on July 29th of that last year, he was arrested due to corruption. The government did not announce any association of his corruption case to the vaccines, because I think it probably doesn't want to. But Chinese people get the hint, right? So why would you arrest this guy if it has nothing to do with the vaccines? So there are a lot of discussions online about that, and I want to end my presentation by giving you a quote. Gao Fu, the director of China's CDC, was asked why the West did not adopt the inactivated virus vaccine, I believe at the beginning of 2021. And Mr. Gao answered this way. And he said, companies producing inactivated virus vaccines need to meet biosafety level 3, meaning P3 standards. China has converted P3 laboratories for experiments into a production facility. Or China has the ability to convert P3 laboratories that were built for experiments into facilities for production. And China has solved many biosafety problems that the West did not did not. And that's why the West did not take the path of inactivated vaccines. And I think after I read that, I think it's just such a joke. By the way, China's vaccines has sold to 28 countries. I think people need to seriously look into the quality, the quality control of Chinese vaccines. I just accidentally run into that article, and when I read it, you know, uh, it really got me concerned. So, all right. With that said, let me see if people have any questions. I provided all the links to you. It's already in the description. You can take a look. All right. Okay. Let me see. Do I have super questions? I have questions. People say, if Lei ever goes back to China, I hope I can tag along. Okay, great. I'll let you know when I go back to China. I hope it's not too far away. From William Warren, is COVID death shaking confidence of little pinks? I hope so. I definitely hope so. Um, all right, let's see. Sir Humphrey, hi Lei, thanks for organizing all the information for another live stream so I can sit and enjoy it on a Sunday afternoon, Sydney, Australia. I'm glad I'm able to do this. Thank you for joining me. All right, let's see. From Travel with Love, thank you, Lei, for sharing your insights and wisdoms. Greetings from California. I wish you and your folks good health, success, and happiness. Thank you. 新年快乐. Same to you. Thank you. We're going to say goodbye to the tiger in a week, less than a week. This time next week, we'll see the year of the rabbit, and we'll say goodbye to tiger. What a tiger year. All right. Did I miss someone? From Venkat, with so much inefficiency, how did such a major Olympic event happen without virus issues? Well, how do we know there wasn't virus issues? I mean, why we didn't see an outbreak during the Olympic in Beijing? Because they had this bubble management, right? They like quarantine everyone who was going to work at the Olympic like a week, like far advance. And then everyone was quarantined, living in a bubble. Like they cannot interact with the outside world, and they have daily testing. So, Lei, what's the meaning and purpose of life? To discover the meaning and purpose of life. I think for many of us, it's a life. Life is a process of discovering the meaning and purpose of life, isn't it? I think to me, the meaning and purpose of life is really to rediscover yourself. Yeah, if we know better of our own weaknesses and attributes, I think people put so much emphasis on the outside world. They look externally, right? They attribute a lot of their sufferings or misfortunes to the outside world. But the more we do that, the unhappier we become. But if you turn that around and try to look within yourself and better understand yourself, I think you live a happier life. You have the answers to many things. You no longer associate, how to say, I think you're more carefree and happy and more independent because you're not blaming others. You're not blaming the outside environment. You're responsible for your own feelings, happiness or miseries, and you're strong enough to take that. So I think, and that's what the Chinese culture teaches us. Try to focus on yourself. I'm not saying in a selfish way, like you focus on your material need, but try to find the solutions in yourself. Once our heart is in the right place, I think we can understand a lot of the things around us. But when you try to blame on the others, you probably won't be able to find the solution. That's what I can think of today. um, all right. How can we? How can you live a happier life? Huh? It went away. We should about another place. Yeah, that's right. All right. Yeah, China reported 60,000 COVID deaths today on Saturday, but I don't think that number. I don't think that number is anywhere accurate. Um, why are the CCP walking back the wolf warrior narrative recently? They suddenly want peace and harmony with the West. Is their economy that bad and they're so scared they are practically begging USA? Yeah, that's a very good observation. It is correct. I covered that in my last live stream. CCP is faced with three challenges or threats. One is domestic unrest, and the other is international pressures, and the last one is internal political infighting. I'm talking about the three threats that the Chinese leader Xi Jinping faces. But of the three, the most threatening is the domestic unrest, and it's tied to the economy. But in terms of internal pressures, it seems that with the start of 2023, everything is happening at the same time. So I don't think it's completely has changed, stepped away from its wolf warrior strategy. But if you look at the how it has treated Japan and South Korea, uh, it wasn't very nice, right? So it has picked its battles. So it's showing a nice face to the United States and its Western allies, but it's still being obnoxious to its Asian neighbors. So you could take a look at my last live stream. I think I'd explained that. All right. So from Sila Larson. Do I pronounce your name right? So get wise and content before you start to decay. Why do you have to start decay? Why do we have to decay? If you're wise and content, you won't decay. So that assumption isn't true. If you're wise and happy and content, you're full of positive energy. Why would you decay? All right. So, all right. Obnoxious. She is so polite. Am I being polite? Okay. I don't know. All right. So, Melissa's mess. All right. I'm kind of losing track whose question I should answer, but, all right. Okay, from anti-PCC. Anti-PCC. You mean CCP. Okay. Can you do live stream 5 to 6 days a week? Thank you. At this point, no, I'm not able to because it does take a lot of time to prepare for these talks. I basically spend a lot of time thinking and uh, digging and trying to find visual aids to help with the presentation. So 5 to 6 days a week will be a little impossible right now, but I'll do my best. All right. Did Xi's mother die from COVID? Well, there was a rumor. I heard people who try to verify it and they said they got it confirmed that she died. But then, I heard two people said that they got it confirmed. And then we saw CCP's denial, but the denial was very soft. I mean, they just showed a press piece that said the Guangdong provincial leaders went to visit a list of retired CCP officials, and his mother's name is on the list. So who knows, right? I think it's 50-50 at this point. All right. So Lei, what is your theory on why YouTube suppress criticism of CPC? I try to understand it. I don't understand it now. I think a few years ago, maybe uh a few years ago, maybe they thought only people on the right or conservative people don't like CCP, and there were a lot of progressive people who kind of like CCP. But now I think the political wing has changed, right? So now you see the Democrat, the Republicans both, uh, support a lot of these initiatives. Uh, have they updated their algorithm, to reflect that? I don't know. The other reason is, are there Chinese working at Google or YouTube that are directly involved in building the algorithms? Probably. Um, so I think I think Google is killing its own future if they do that, if they don't correct this. Because when CCP goes down, so will go its business or business prospect. All right. They're labeling it racist. It's not. Well, CCP does not equate Chinese. I mean, if they say if I don't like the Chinese Communist Party, then you call me racist. Then by the same token, if I say if I don't like the Democrats, am I also a racist? Or if I don't like a particular party in the US, is that when you don't like a political party, that makes one a racist? It doesn't make sense, you know. And they forgot Chinese people do not like CCP, you know. They just can't see it. All right. Is that because many parts of the US elites are colluding with the CPC, like Goldman Sachs? If I use the word China or CCP, my comments are deleted instantly. Um, I don't know. I don't like to believe that people are colluding. I think by now they should have waken up. If not, then they're in trouble. I think uh, I think people are seeing CCP more clearly now. So they're better. Uh, I think oftentimes that's what I still try. I think we need to be rational when we talk about the CCP. Uh, yeah, because just state the facts and let people decide. That's better. Hi, Lei, have you met Dalai Lama? What's your opinion of him? I have not met him. What's my opinion of him? I don't know him very well to say anything, but just from the little that I know, I think he could have done more uh, for the people in Tibet and also people in China. It's hard for world leaders today not to be political, you know. So it's hard. Alrighty, so it's been 50 minutes. It's Saturday night, and I thank you very much for joining me. And have a great weekend. I'll see you next week. Okay, bye bye.